Pessoal, olá, tudo bem? Então a gente está aqui com mais um podcast internacional da Hordes, Dairyman Brasil. A gente tem tido a oportunidade aí de conversar com algumas pessoas que são muito importantes na pecuária de leite mundial. E hoje a gente tem o prazer, né, de ter o Dr. Gary conosco, que tem muita experiência aí na pecuária de leite, tem uma vida dedicada na pecuária de leite, uma vida dedicada muito também, apesar de várias áreas, depois focou muito na parte financeira. Então, o Dr. Gary trabalhou com centenas, né, de milhares, na verdade, de produtores de leite nos Estados Unidos, ajudando em várias decisões de compra, de ampliação, de passagem da fazenda, né, das gerações futuras, de definição de metas, de quanto que pode pegar de dinheiro por vaca, qual que é a meta de investimento por vaca, custo de produção e etc. Muita experiência. E com isso, o Dr. Gary escreveu um livro, né, um livro que se consolidou nos Estados Unidos como a referência em termos de dados financeiros para você tocar uma fazenda. Temos que o nome do livro é O Dinheiro Importa, uma pecuária leiteira. Esse livro ele virou uma bíblia, porque ele é muito prático. Né? A entrevista, esse podcast tem como objetivo e entender um pouco mais, né, o que levou e como é que foi a vida dele para escrever algo tão valioso e tão imprescindível para a pecuária de leite americana que se tornou internacional. E agora a gente vai ter também a oportunidade de ter esse livro disponível aí para os produtores brasileiros, né, com a gente ter noção de meta, de investimento, de momento de ampliação, de relação dívida por vaca e assim por diante. São métricas estabelecidas. E um ponto importante é que o Dr. Gary tem muita experiência com banco. Já foi CEO de banco e hoje, pelo que eu entendo, é um dos conselheiros do Banco Federal de Chicago. Então ele entende, é importante, o que o banco quer ver, precisa ver do seu negócio para te emprestar mais dinheiro. Então tem os dois lados da moeda aí, tá bom? All right, Dr. Gary, again, thank you so much. For us, of course, Dairyman Brazil is a great pleasure to having you with us. We're sure that this talk will be very helpful for their producers because I think the title of the book is just everything. Money matters. And for dairy matters more. Are very focused on the dairy. So thank you so much for being in this Hordes Dairy International podcast. If you want to just introduce yourself and say a few words before you start, please go ahead.
Okay. As you said, my name is Gary Sipiorski. I live in the Green Bay area. I've lived in the state of Wisconsin all of my life. I've traveled throughout the United States. I've traveled through Europe. Unfortunately, I have not been south of the equator, so I'm not totally familiar with the dairying in the South America, and particularly Brazil. I have been involved in the dairy industry for over 50 years. I spent 18 years with Ralston Purina doing nutrition work, and I spent 30 years working in the financial end of it, as a loan officer at the bank, as a president and CEO of the bank, and now retired from there. I'm now on the board of directors of the bank, where I have been there for 32 years, associated with the bank, but very extensive with the state of Wisconsin and throughout the United States as far as dealing with dairy and throughout the world. I've written for Hordes Dairyman probably for about 30, maybe 25 years now. So the articles have been pretty regular and pretty well accepted. And I try to stay very much in tune to what's going on in the industry. And even though I'm still retired, I'm still very involved, obviously, from the banking standpoint. I have been married to my wife, Linda, for 52 years. We have 3 adult children and 4 grandchildren. 2 of our children and 2 grandchildren live in the state of Washington. And our other daughter, who is a PhD and her husband's a PhD in anthropology. She is in international law. They have 2 children, and they live in Portugal. So I get a chance to get exposed to the Portuguese language as we travel there. So look forward to questions that you have, and I'm very pleased that you are going to be using the book, and that's what it's for. It's when we share, that's when all of us grow more. So very pleased to be part of this, and I thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Excellent. I can see, we have all this experience at the farms, and you were able to put that in the book. Because I think when you read the book and you can see that the guy sometimes he don't have the experience, practical experience, but at this book, you can see that you put the experience that you have 30, 40 years at the farms. You could express that because you only could write that if you have done that. That was very good. All right. So the first question I think is the easiest one. What inspired you to write Dairy Money Matters?
I like to share. I've been asked to speak all around the United States and around Europe. I actually have been in Mexico and spoke there as well. And as we put these articles together, one article after another, talking to the editors of Hoard's Dairymen, they felt it was important as well to put this in writing, so to share with others in the future. So there's been a lot of time obviously spent in putting these articles together, seeing the evolution of the dairy industry in the last 50 years, particularly in the States, going from basically 25, 30 cows, and now we have herds of 1,000 and 2,000 cows. It's just been interesting to see how that's all transpired. So it was just nice to put it all together in one book.
Excellent. Very good. And I think you just touched on a very important part of the dairy industry. And how do you think the dairy industry has evolved over the years in terms of financial practice? Do you think that your book or your articles at Horde somehow help uh, to move forward on the financial side in the dairy industry?
Well, based on the fact that I get asked to speak at different events, and Hordes continues want me to write articles, dairy producers listening to it. Wherever I go, people are familiar with the articles, they're familiar with the information, and particularly with a transition that we've had in the United States. In the mid 1980s, the milk support was taken away from dairy producers, which allowed dairy producers a margin. And the government makes sure that the price of cheese always was higher than what the cost of production was, that the dairy producers are allowed a margin. But after the mid 80s, particularly around 1983, that went away. So producers became very, very aware that they needed to be paying attention to their financials. And as I entered the banking business 30 years ago, sitting down across the table from producers, you could see how hungry they were for that type of information. So this was important to put it in a book where producers could read it at their leisure. And it is not only producers, but educators like yourself, all facets, veterinarians, anyone associated with the industry, milk plants. They've all found interest in the book, and they've all found that the information was helpful to them.
Oh, and it is. And it's very helpful because sometimes, we have so many people about different technical areas talking about financial. I'm the veterinarian, the agronomist, the animal scientist, the bank, and their producer said, well, who can I trust? And now we have a book that, of course, came from lots and lots of dairy and lots of experience that we can trust. All right. On the same line, What do you think are the most significant financial challenges that the dairy farms face today?
It's first of all really understanding, and I'm pretty biased about this because being involved in the financial end of it. But in the past, dairy producers simply were focused on taking care of their cows and raising crops. And they all felt that if they did that, they were successful. But what has happened as this industry has consolidated and grown is the financials all of a sudden have become very important. In order to know their cost of production, you just can't milk cows. A Western dairy producer told me one time, he says, Gary, all you have to do is feed them and squeeze them. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. You have to understand the balance sheet. First of all, the farm structure. What's the assets and liabilities in the farm? How many dollars are invested on the farm? What kind of return on those assets are you getting? What type of return on the money that you have involved in the farm? And that's half of the story, that balance sheet. The other half is the cash flow, the income statement. What are the expenses? What is the income? How can I attain a margin? And all of a sudden, dairy producers over the last 20 years very slowly have begun to recognize that as margins have become tighter. And we can see this happening worldwide, that there's inflation in many things that the dairy producer buys, but yet the milk price seems to be somewhat stagnant. And in the United States, the only way the producers have been able to bridge that gap was to milk more cows. But even if you milk more cows, you still have to have a margin. So that is the biggest thing that dairy producers face today. How do I achieve that margin?
Excellent. Well, I think we have the same challenge also in Brazil, and if not in the world, we will be talking about the consolidation of the dairy industry. But on the same line, we always have this question. In your opinion, what is the future of the small farm on dairy farm or a small family on dairy farm in an
I get
industry
that.
that's increasing dominated by large scale operation?
I get that question all the time. And what we have, and I can speak different areas in the United States. In the eastern part of the United States, in Pennsylvania, in the Lancaster area. In fact, I was just out there this last summer putting on some presentations. As long as you have milk processors, the key there is, will the milk processors pick up the milk? There are some people, consumers, that really want to buy milk from a small farm. We have milk plants in the Midwest that still put milk in bottled milk. And there are consumers that really want to, they pay a premium for that milk. And as long as we have processors that will pick up that milk, that will process that milk, and as long as those producers are satisfied with the lifestyle, with the income that they're getting, that is the critical thing. It's what are you satisfied with? We will continue to see some consolidation. I mean, as I said before, dairy producers had to milk more cows in order to spread their expenses over those cows, because the expenses kept going up and the milk price stayed the same. But there are certain regions and areas where the small producers, and I'm talking herds of 25, 50 cows, 100 cows. Today, that would be a smaller producer. But as long as there's consumers that want that milk, will pay extra for that milk and cheese and other types of products, there will be a place for the young and the small producer, as long as they're satisfied with the income and their lifestyle equals the income that's coming off that farm as far as the margin and the profitability.
Excellent. Excellent. And we see that a lot of the producers that they find a way to sell at the farm, they become organic, they do something to deliver the milk. Very good. So just following that, what are the financial strategies that the dairy farms use to remain sustainable in the face of this challenge?
Restate that for me, please.
We understand that we have this challenge in the industry that's consolidating. In addition, so you have to have more cows. In addition, we're always going to be discussion about the price of milk, and sometimes you said it doesn't follow the inflation. So, in terms of financial tools, what are available for these producers to use to remain sustainable?
Well, a good example of that is the price of machinery. I mean, obviously, you have milk cows, you have to harvest forage. We had many producers now that said, I can't afford this machinery anymore. I always say the large machinery manufacturers don't call dairy producers and say, we have a new tractor to sell. What should we price the tractor at? Well, that has nothing to do with the price of milk. The equipment people will price machinery based on their engineering and what they have to get it. So many dairy producers now have decided not to own their own machinery. They have the work custom done. Somebody else does it. They find that as long as they've got a good relationship with the custom operator, as we call them, they can get planting done. They can get the harvesting of the crop completed. They can get the manure spread. I mean, that's a huge factor. It's about $1.100 just to get the manure back on the field. And we like to call it nutrients back on the field. So many producers have made that decision. Other producers have found out that somebody else can raise their heifers cheaper than what they can raise them at a lower cost because of the availability of feed in certain areas. So we've seen producers use that type of concept to have some of those expenses, and they find out that somebody else can do that type of work for less expensive than what they can do it. Some producers don't own land. I mean, land is obviously very important because you have to grow crops. We in the States say it takes about 3 acres for forage and grain in order to feed a dairy animal. Well, most producers, or some producers now, are finding they don't have to buy land. They can rent the land. So
Yes.
think about this. They rent land. They can do that cheaper than ownership. Land is a terrible investment. Yes, it's grown up in value with inflation, but it's very, very costly to own land. So if they can rent it for cheaper than they can own it, that's very positive. Have somebody else raise your heifers for less than you can, that's a positive effect. Have somebody else do the work of harvesting crops, that's positive. So those are things that we've seen that producers have used in order to maintain a more profitable margin for themselves.
Excellent. So just focus on the cows and what we're good, and outsource whatever you can on your money is stop it. Make your money work for you. Very good. Excellent. So, what are some of the most common mistakes that the dairy farmers make when they manage finance?
First of all, um, one of the things that they make a mistake, I shouldn't, maybe avoiding mistakes, but maybe a better way for me to say this. Having a good relationship with the lender is extremely important. Being communicating with the lender on a regular basis. Regular means twice a year, no more than 4 times a year, quarterly maybe. It's important to have that relationship because the investment in farms is so great that borrowing money is common because of the investment. And there's nothing wrong with borrowing money. As long as you get a bigger return than the interest that you're paying on that money. The second thing producers forget to do, and that is, and you'll hear me use the terminology, do their balance sheet, know what their assets and liabilities are. At the very end of the year in December, they need to count all of the inventory of cattle and feed that they have on hand, and know where their loans are and be able to have a balance sheet. They need to understand that. The next thing that producers fail to do is do a projection for the oncoming year, looking at the income and expenses for the last year, and do a projection where they think the expenses and income will be for the next year, and then sharing that information with their lender, sharing that information with their family, sharing that information with the workers, particularly their key workers. When they say, well, this is what our expenses are going to be in the milking parlor, is there a way that we can limit some of these expenses? Can we do a better job in some of these areas? So communication with your lender, communication with your family, communication with your employees, particularly your key employees that are managers. These are things that producers need to do in order to have a much better handle on where the money is going and where it's coming from.
Very good. Very good. Very complete. I like that. In fact, it is in the book.
Yes, it
Very good.
is.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. So, what are the key financial indicators that dairy farms should be monitoring regularly? Maybe the most important, the five most important one, if you will.
Well, obviously, there's the operating expenses are extremely important. That's about 80% of the cost of producing milk. Now let's break that down a little bit. The very biggest expense is feed. Now it's not only feed that's purchased, but it's also feed that's grown. And that feed, if you buy your corn silage and haylage and dry hay, that's one kind of expense. But what if you grow it on your own farm? You need to break that down to figure out what the cost is to raise these crops, because that's all part of the feed cost. It's not only out of pocket costs, but it's all the cost involved in raising that forage and grain on the farm. So number one is looking at the feed cost. The second most important thing, and people miss this factor, and that's the cost of raising young stock. Many
Yes.
people just ignore that because they say, I have to have replacement animals and I don't understand the cost of this and I don't need to. Well, they need to understand the cost. That's why some dairy producers have made the decision to have others raise their heifers, those that are paying attention of what that real cost is. So that's extremely important. The third thing that's a very big cost, at least in the States, and that is the cost of labor. How do you get the most out of the labor you have? Some people say I need so much milk per labor on my farm, but it's still a cost. What is that cost? How can you be more efficient? How can you sit down with your employees and say, how can we get these tasks done more efficiently than what we're doing right now? That's extremely important. So along with those are three of the largest costs that we have on a farm right now that we have to pay attention to. Another cost would be the cost of money. And what is the interest cost? What type of agreement do you have with your lender? How long do you have before you pay some of this back? The third thing is probably it goes along with the cropping in, and that is what is that cost of machinery? How do we evaluate that? It goes back to some of the previous comments I made. What does it cost me to own this pieces of equipment? What pieces can I eliminate by having somebody else do the work? What pieces can I eliminate by having someone else take care of the manure that comes from the farm and where it goes? So
Excellent.
those are 5 key areas that probably make the biggest drain on a farm that we really need to pay attention to. And that's where we will make a huge difference. That's many, many dollars versus some of the smaller expenses that don't have as much impact. But those 5 expenses have the largest impact.
Very good. I think it was very helpful because a lot of times you don't have the time to think about it. We just have it. We just have all the machines and we just do we spread the manure and we all plant and we all make the silo and all of a sudden maybe at the end we don't do it, we don't do anything good. We
Well,
just do everything more or less.
dairy producers have a bad habit of working, and they stop, and they need to stop and think and spend some time thinking.
Excellent. Okay, so I think this is a very good one. We had some people that sent some questions, and I think that's an important one. What advice do you have for farmers when it comes to managing the debt?
In other words, the amount of money they have borrowed, how do they manage that?
Yes.
All right. In the book, and you'll see some of my recommendations, and I think it's really important that I make this statement. We can give dairy producers a lot of information, but it's really up to them to make these decisions. I want to qualify that. I never want to come across like I'm trying to run somebody's farm. It's up to them to run it. We can give them advice. Now, when it comes to financing and debt, they cannot really have more than 50% of their assets borrowed money. That is extremely important because if you have too much money borrowed, you have too much debt to pay back, and
Yes.
it doesn't work. Absolute minimum is 30% equity in your farm. In other words, 70% debt, 30% equity. You have to be a very, very good producer to be able to make ends meet with those situations. Farms will borrow money. Everyone would like to think they're 100% equity. They have no borrowed money, but that's not the real world. It takes money to make money, particularly on a dairy farm.
Yes.
The other thing that
Yes.
goes with that is dairy producers cannot pay more than 20% of the farm income in interest and principal payment. That's something sometimes people forget. You can't have more than 20% of your milk check going for those 2 items of interest and expense. The other thing that we really take a look at from a banking standpoint is that looking at the amount of money that's borrowed, but the money that's borrowed compared to the I've got to think of the terminology that I let me just write this down here as I think about this. We talk about debt to equity or equity debt. I think the key factor is there that you can't have more than 20% of your income going out for interest and principal. I think that probably summarizes it the best.
Yes. Okay. Very good. So let's think about the price of milk. At most 20% of how much you get for the milk for paying debt.
Yeah,
That
I
would be a
say
fair.
I'm saying 20%. You can't, for what you get paid for milk, you can't have more than 20% going for
Yes.
interest and principal.
Yes. Very easy. Okay. Thank you. Let's say here we get like half a dollar per liter. Let's make it easy to a dollar. So 20 cents at most to pay the debt
20
because you have
cents.
to keep up the.
That's right.
Okay.
20 cents. If you get paid $1 for milk, you can't spend more than 20 cents. Here's something else to think about. A term that we like to use in banking, and that's called debt to revenue. You really shouldn't not have more than, ideally would be $1 worth of debt for every $1 worth of revenue. Let me put this in this terms. If I have $100 of income, I should not have more than $100, or excuse me, $100 of debt. I can't have more than $100 of revenue. This is looking at the amount of debt to the gross amount of income that I have. When farms get in trouble is when they have $2 of debt for every $100 of revenue.
2 to 1.
That can be manageable, but it's very, very tight. And at times, we have dairy producers that may have as much as $3 of debt for every dollar of revenue. And when I say revenue, I'm talking gross income from the farm. That's from milk, calf sales, cow sales, any other revenue on the farm. That gets to be very critical when it becomes 3 to 1. 1 to 1 is best, 2 to 1 is better. And again, that is something that there's articles in the book that specify for that. But that's a mistake sometimes people make because they want to borrow more and more money, and then they forget how much money they have based on the income that they have.
Okay. Okay, very good. So 1 to 1 is good. The debt to revenue relationship. Maybe 2 to 1 is acceptable, but 3 to 1 is danger.
Oh, yes, very much. Yep.
Excellent. Those hints are very helpful. Okay, next one. I think that's a very good one. What is the importance for dairy producers to understand profit margins in the dairy farm?
Well, why are you milking cows? Okay, you like cows, you like the openness, but you need to make an income. It's important. And I'll use the terminology return on income or return on assets and return on equity. Let me put it in dollars form. If I have $100 of income on a farm, gross income on a farm, I should be able to have at least 15 cents that I put in my pocket. It doesn't seem
$15.
like much, does it? Every dollar, every dollar, $1,
Okay,
I should be able to put 15 cents. That's a 15% return, is what that is.
great.
Because I have to replace equipment, I have to maintain my facilities, but I need to have some profitability. I mean, 10 cents to a dollar is okay. 15 cents is better, but I should be able to have 15 cents for every dollar of income. When the end of the year comes, every dollar of income, gross income from that farm, I should have 15 cents left in my checkbook, if I can use that terminology.
Yes,
After
very good.
all expenses are paid, after all interest is paid.
It's a good target. And are dairy producers able to do that in US?
Yes, the very good ones. The very good ones will do 15 to 20 cents on a dollar.
Margin to
The
20
the
cents. Okay.
average the average the average farm is only 4 cents to every dollar. The average farm.
4%. Okay. Excellent. And on that line, how do you see these farmers, the good ones maybe, how do they track their expenses to ensure that they have this 15-20% profitability? How do on a daily basis, how do they track everything and make it happen?
The first thing they do is at the very beginning of the year, is they look at what their projection is going to be. And they break that projection into months. Every 12 months, they know, they project. And it's a guessing game. And I understand that. But you've got to start someplace based on the previous year's income and expenses. And they break that down for every 12 months. So what they'll do is they'll look at that at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and then they back that off to a daily basis. Have a very good dairy producer that sadly has just passed away. And as he walked to the dairy every morning, he thought, what can I do to make my cows more comfortable today? And this dairy producer was extremely successful. Now, he was more than thinking just what I can do for cow comfort, but think about what he was thinking. As I walk into the barn, when I feed my animals, how can I make the most of the feed that I'm feeding, that I'm not wasting? When a TMR is filled, and we have a windy day, what happens to things like mineral and the high price protein, and the wind is blowing? We lose it. And they're thinking about, all right, now how can I save that feed? It's being blown around when I'm putting it in there. How can I do that? They're always thinking. They're looking at their milk production. They're looking at how the cows are being treated in the milking parlor. Is the teat dipping being done before? Are the cows being dried properly before the units are put on? Is the equipment working that the units come off at the appropriate time? Do we have enough water on the farm? And this was a really good example. This is a very good dairy producer told me this a month ago. He says, one of the employees came up and said, I don't think some of our waterers are working. And he went and he looked at the watering, the bowls, and he said, well, they're working. These are watering troughs. But he noticed it was working very slowly. So what he thought, he said, maybe I don't have enough water pressure. So he drilled a new well. He spent the money to drill in a new well. And he drilled it, and the cows came up 4 pounds of milk. And all it was they were just simply not getting enough water. See, this is a dairy producer that's thinking. He's got employees that are thinking. They said, why, what's going on? How come some of these cows aren't getting enough water? So there was 4 pounds of milk that he was losing. I'll give you another example that a dairy producer did. They felt the milk was not being cooled quick enough in the parlor. They had coolers before it went into the bulk tank. So they invested money in more coolers before the pre-coolers before the milk went into the big milk tank. His milk percent of fat went from a 3% to a 3.5 overnight, because he realized what was happening. The milk was not being cooled properly, and there were little fat balls that were forming in the milk, and therefore when the milk was tested, that fat ball was not being tested. He says that this is a 1,000-cow dairy. He says, I'll bet that in 10 years I lost $2 million in income because it was not being cooled properly. So these are things that dairy producers look at, paying attention to the small things that are going on with the dairy cows. How do I keep them comfortable? How do I make sure the feed is being fed often enough? It was being pushed up to the cows at the proper time. All of these little things, it's these details. Farmers that pay attention to these little details are thinking dollars, because they know this is either costed me dollars or I can gain dollars. That's why you have some dairy producers earning 15 to 20 cents on a dollar, and others are only earning 4 cents on a dollar.
Excellent. We say here that it's the eye of the owner that make the bull fat. So
Yes.
that is also
And
the eye of the owner.
and the employees, making sure you encourage employees to look at things, because the owner cannot see 1,000 cows every day and
Yes.
1,000 heifers. There's other people.
The team. Build a better team and keep working on our team. Very good. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to move to just practical questions. We understand that from 2003, you guys have around 100,000 dairy producers, and in 2025, you have less than 27,000 dairy producers. In fact, we saw in the last hordes there that they had one co-op that only have 3 dairy producers. So there was such a strong consolidation that was amazing. So, in your opinion, just give us 3 positive factors or tools or things in terms of management and financial that help these dairy producers to keep milking their cows. 3 things that they did well. Let's say the guys that moved from 100,000 dairy to 25,000. What this 25,000 did good in terms of management and financial. That tell me 3 things that you think that made a difference, so they moved to the next level.
First thing that they did before they changed, and I'll give you an example. I know dairy producers 50 years ago that milked 15 cows, 1-5. Today they're milking 1,000 cows. How did they do that? First thing, they got better before they got bigger.
Oh,
They
yes.
really paid attention to everything that was going on their farm, and how can we do things better. The next thing they did is they were not afraid to take risk. Now, when I say risk, I'm talking a calculated risk. When dairy farms, dairy producers, I'm thinking 30 years ago, were milking 50 cows and they decided to go to 300 cows. That was a big change. They had to build a milking parlor and free stalls. And what they did though is they did a projection. They said, what if we milk more cows? What will be our cost? What will the income be? What will my debt be? How much debt will I have? Some of these farms had maybe 80% equity position, and by making an expansion, all of a sudden their equity dropped to 30%. But they said, I've done my projections. I've talked to my milk plant. My milk plant will accept my additional milk. I will take care of that additional debt because I'm going to be making this much income. The other thing that they did that was very important, and as important as the previous 2 that I said, is they knew how to take care of their employees. They were a coach, not a boss. A boss says, get this done. A coach says, let's talk about why it's important to do this particular job in a certain way. I'll give you an example. The boss says, take care of those baby calves as soon as they're born. A coach says, it's very important to let that cow calve on her own. Don't force the calving by taking a chain and starting to pull that calf too soon. Once that calf is born, make sure that it's breathing properly. Take some wet, dry towels, rub it down, let the cow lick it. Disinfect that navel as soon as you can to prevent problems with that calf in the future. Make sure that baby calf immediately in the first hour gets a gallon of colostrum from that cow. If the calf will not suckle the cow, make sure you get milk, that colostrum, into the calf, even if you have to tube feed it. A very simple example of how a boss works versus a coach that helps his employees understand. And I have worked and I have sat down with dairy producers that wanted to expand, and they did a terrible job with the few employees they had. And I, as a lender, said, I will not give you any money. I don't think you have the skills, the people skills, to be able to have a larger herd of cows. So those are three things that I see. They get better at what they do before they expand. They take a risk by borrowing more money, but they do their homework. They know what their cash flow is going to be. And they know how to take care of employees and treat them right.
Excellent. Very helpful. And I agree with that. Very good. Another quick question. What is, maybe just a short answer, what is a goal for profit per cow per year?
um, I because I'm familiar with it, and you'll have to look at it from your standpoint. A dairy cow will generate about $5,000 of income a year on the average. The profitability should be at least $500 profit. So what is that? That's 10%, right? See, there's
Yes.
10 cents on a dollar. That's what we were talking about all before. That's minimum. There are some farms that will generate $1,000 a cow net income. So there might be one farm on one side of the road that generates $600, the farm on the other side that ends up with $1,000 a cow. And they might have a neighbor that only gets $100 a cow. That's because of the management skills and how they pay attention to details and do all those things that we've been talking about so far. But on the average, $500-$600 a cow once they generate $5,000
Per year. $500-$600 per cow per year.
Yep, net income.
Net. Okay. If the cow is generating 5,000 of income, that would be 10%.
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. So on that line, I'm also a nutritionist. We use a lot a goal of income over feed cost. It's something that a lot of people use in Brazil, and we see that being used a lot in US too. Is that a good indicator?
Well, that's one of the indicators. When you say income over feed cost, are we talking purchased feed, or are we putting a price on the forage that's being fed and adding that to the purchased feed on a per cow basis? I think
Usually,
I think you really have to qualify that when you look at that statement.
very good. Well, for us, it's very general. It's just the amount of milk that the cow produce times how much we paid by the milk, less how much the TMR the cow is eating, priced on that day. It's a simple number, but it's important for us to look at the difference, how much the cow is living, paying the feed, which is the most expensive uh, breeding cost. That's how we do it.
Let me give you an example. If we say milk is $20 a hundred, for example, and my total feed cost is $10 a hundred, that's 50%, isn't it?
Yes.
And maybe my purchase feed out of that is $7 a hundred. Right now, I'm hearing the nutritionists talk about income. They talk about feed cost of 10, 12, maybe $14 per hundredweight. Um, it's an indicator. It's one
Okay.
indicator that you can look, and obviously that's going to be highly determined by the price of grain that's fed to the dairy cows. I mean, a few years ago, corn in the United States was selling for $7 a bushel. Today, it's about $3.50 a bushel, $4 a bushel. Makes a huge difference. So,
Yes.
does that mean my farm is? I'm doing a better job with my milk cows because the price of grain went from $7 a bushel to $4 a bushel? So you got to keep that in mind. It's just a factor of where the feed cost is huge, as we talked about a few minutes ago. That's 50% of the cost. So you have to keep that in mind that that's a nice number to look at, but it's not the only number to look at. But much of that is based on the fact that the grain prices particularly go up and down. So let's just keep that
Makes
in
sense.
mind that
Yep.
we're being fair with what we're looking at with that.
Yep. Very clear. Clear to us. And it's a helpful number, but there are others. And with your book, we're going to be learning how to look at other numbers. So, in terms of savings, looking at your cash flow on a short term, do you need some kind of savings per cow uh, in a short term basis to operate the farm? If so, how much we need to save that to run the farm, or per cow, or per any kind of indicator?
Yeah. Um, there's a couple of ways to look at that. I like to look at it that you should have at least $500 a cow sitting in the checkbook. Um, that's we call that liquidity, cash liquidity. There are some farms that will tell you they only need $100 because they have lines of credit with their lender that they can rely on if they need. Other farms will tell you, well, I only need $100 because I market my milk. I know they do a cash flow, but they know exactly what they're going to get paid for milk in the next 12 months. Now, that gets into a whole nother area of marketing milk. And they know what their feed cost is going to be because they've also gone on the futures market and locked in what they're going
Yes.
for grain. So they can probably operate with less cash in their checkbook because they know from month to month what their income and expenses are. Another dairy producer that has no milk fixed, no cost or no income futures on that, they have no feed that's locked in, they need a little extra margin. But the extra margin that many farmers rely on is called the line of credit, operating line of credit, that I say should be between $500 and $1,000 a cow, that you have an agreement with your lender that you can. It's like a savings account, except it's borrowed money when you need it. It's sitting there if you need it. So it's important to have that because we know the volatility of milk prices have been extreme. In the States here, we've seen milk go from $15 a hundred a year later to $25 a hundred. Well, how can I even manage my farm with that? And then it goes back down to $20. So there's such a variation. So I need to keep a cash cushion of cash on hand, and I also need to have that important line of credit with my lender. That's where it's important to have that relationship with your lender. That's where it's important to do that projection and share that with your lender and say, look, it looks like come mid-year, I am going to need some extra money because I'm anticipating higher expenses and the milk income is not going to be enough to cover that. So that's why that relationship, once again, with the lender is extremely important, to have the agreement that I will be able to draw that money when I need it.
Very good. Excellent. Very helpful, because we need to start having these goals and start having this conversation. Just this is always a common question too. How much money we should have invested per cow, maybe on machines and equipments? I think some of my friends, and I think our partner Renato, got from the book that we should have at most $1,300 per cow invested on machine and equipments in a herd. Does that make sense? Where did this number come from?
All right. Here's the range. Dairy producers will have, and this is on, I'm talking cattle, buildings, land, and machinery. Anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 invested per cow. Now, if I have a lot of custom work done and somebody else does my machinery work, I'll have less, maybe 15,000. But I see the range of 10,000 to 25,000. Farms that have no land, they just milk cows. They have a milking parlor, they have a free stall, they have a few pieces of equipment to feed cattle and to get rid of some manure. They'll have 10,000 invested per cow. So it all depends how many assets a dairy farm has invested. When it comes to machinery, I'll see dairy producers anywhere from, I'm going to say, $1,500 to $2,500 invested per cow in machinery. And again, some people have far less than that have custom work done. But I think the key factors that you're looking at if I look at all of the assets I have on a farm, if it's land, buildings, cattle, machinery, I could have as much as $15,000 to $25,000 invested per cow. And the simple way to do that is at the end of the year, when you look at that balance sheet, the total assets divided by the total number of milk cows, including all of the dry cows.
Very good. Excellent. And the last questions on the technical side. Do you see, is that possible today to have a herd of 100 cows milking and be competitive? Do you think that's viable in the US? Or is that farm, if they keep only 200 cows, they will disappear? They need to grow.
I have a neighbor just up the road, a half mile from me, that milks 100 cows. So yeah, it can be done. It can be done with less cows. And again, the lifestyle. They don't drive big new pickup trucks. They have older used pickup trucks. Okay, they don't go on vacations to the Bahamas. They don't want to travel. They stay home. Again, it depends on your lifestyle, and long as a milk plant is willing to pick up that milk. And a good example, I was in Pennsylvania this summer, and there's a lot of what we call Amish and Mennonite farmers. It's a very religious background that these farmers have. And a lot of those farms only milk 25, 50 cows, and they pick up all the milk with semi trucks. And some of those semis will make 28 stops a day to get a full load of milk. And it costs $25 every time they drive in the yard. That's the cost to pick up that the farmer pays. But the milk plant is willing to take that milk. The milk truck driver is willing to make that many stops. So as long as you've got, and we've made this comment before, as long as you've got milk plants that will take that milk, customers that prefer to buy that milk from those size farms, those folks will be in business. Will we have larger farms in the future? Absolutely. We have right now around 27,000 dairies in the United States. The state of Wisconsin, I just saw the number the other day, we have 5,365 farms in Wisconsin. It's 50 years ago, we had 40,000 farms in Wisconsin. Today we have 5,300 farms in Wisconsin. So yes, we've had consolidation. But again, I can't emphasize enough the relationship you have with the milk plant, the milk plant field people that come out. You need to make sure you're providing the kind of milk, quality of milk that they want. As long as they will pick up that milk, they've got a place for it. That will work fine. You mentioned before there was a milk plant that only had 3 customers. Well, that could be. You know, there are farms with 8,000 cows. Well, if it's a small enough plant, all you need is 3 of those customers and you maybe have enough milk. The only danger to that milk plant is I got to take care of those farm customers, because if they leave, you know, I'm in trouble. And it's the same with the farmers, because we've had farmers get letters that say, in 30 days, we're closing our milk plant. We're not going to pick up your milk anymore. And we've had cases where there's 100 farms that all of a sudden have to look for some place to go with their milk. That's a problem. And sometimes what's happening right now, if a farmer has 800 cows and they want to go to 1,000 cows, they have to talk to the milk plant. And they have to ask the milk plant, will you take my milk if I have 200 more cows? In some cases, the milk plant says, no, we won't take any more milk. So that holds up expansion at times, based on how much milk the milk plant will actually take from you. But as long as there's a market, as long as the milk plant will pick up the milk, and as long as your lifestyle and you can meet expenses and you have an income, there's still room for smaller herds, at least today.
Excellent. Very good. So just like a personal question now, what has been the most rewarding part at your work in the dairy industry?
Over the 50 years, the most rewarding part of it has been helping dairy producers succeed. Helping the next generation. Probably the biggest thing is helping the next generation. There's farms I'm working on right now. I'm working with the 3rd generation that I was 50 years ago. I want to see people succeed. That's my biggest goal. As a nutritionist with Ralston Purina, I wanted to see people succeed. As a banker, I want to see people succeed. I do some consulting work today. I'm still on the board of directors of the bank. I want to help and give advice to people to help them succeed. It's up to them. They have to take and decide what information is right from them. But that is absolutely the most rewarding. When I've worked with farms, I can think of a wonderful example of 2 farmers. One had 50 cows, one had 80 cows. I helped them combine their farms. We sat down with an attorney to come up with an agreement. The attorney said, Gary, you're making a mistake with these people. They want to milk 600 cows. You are making a big mistake. And I said, no, these 2 guys know their business. They know cows and they know business. Today, those gentlemen are milking 2,000 cows, and the next generation is now in that farm. That is satisfying to me. They are probably one of the most 10 out of 10 farms in Wisconsin that are the most profitable. They are in the now top 10. That is satisfying to me. Out of 5,300 farms, they are probably number 10 in profitability in the state of Wisconsin.
Excellent. So you know who you work with. Very good. Maybe the last one. How do you stay motivated when faced with the challenge of the dairy industry?
Just wanting on a day-to-day basis to see people succeed, knowing full well that we'll have ups and downs in the business, anticipating that, encouraging people, making sure that they, and particularly today with the economics, that they have a better understanding of their financials, and they know what to expect. Because they're doing projections, they know what they expect on their farm. It's being able to have some foresight. There's always blind sides, things that you don't expect that happen. But just expect the unexpected. Have that cushion. Have some cash on hand. Have a lender that you know will give them some cash if they need it.
Okay. And what is your what's next for your in terms of writing and other projects related to the dairy industry? Do you have any plans for the future?
Well, I'm still writing in hordes. I'm doing 8 articles a year. That's what they've asked. I am continuing to be on the bank board. I have one more year that I'm about 18 months. I can still be on the bank board before they say I age out. So and occasionally, and when I get asked to speak, I will be selective as far as speaking with different groups. But I will continue to stay engaged, at least as long as it's being requested of me. I have done some work with the professional dairy producers of Wisconsin, teaching financial literacy, working with Dr. Kevin Bernhard out of Platteville. He continues to do that. I continue to do some other things. But I've helped them develop that program 15 years ago, and it's really a great program. So I will continue to do my writing is what I will continue to do, and very selectively speak where I'm asked to go. So that's what I'll do. I like to continue to stay in touch with the dairy industry.
Excellent, Dr. Gary. In this like 1 hour that stay together, I'm sure we have generated so much good information. We will share with their producers and make sure that if they don't watch everything, we'll cut in small pieces. Because it's such an important thing that we want them to be still their farmer for the next generation. But they
Yes.
will have to change. Just like you said, from 100 to 25,000 dairy farms and only to 5,000, maybe a quarter of these farmers in Wisconsin, they had to change.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the other 75,000, they disappear. And we want to help them. If they want to disappear, is that by choice? If they have something else better to do, that's okay. But we don't want them to suffer. And then all of a sudden, the wave came, and they said, "Wow, what do I do?" Because they have maybe a debt to assets greater than 3, for example. They have too much, they owe too much. Anyhow, thank you so much. Very helpful. We're very eager to starting having your book in Portuguese. You should be able to do that very soon. And for sure, we want to work with you for a long, long time. Okay?
Okay. It's been a pleasure. I'm wonderful spending the last hour with you.